There's a new front in Trump's war against Americans who don't support him, and it involves the potential for stripping away citizenship from Americans. A quick note, I'm Justin Glaw, an independent journalist, and I run American Doom. You can keep up with my work by subscribing to my newsletter on Substack at american-doom.com. Now, the memo outlines categories of naturalized citizens who are objectively bad people, like terrorists, sex offenders, and violent criminals. But the memo also calls for the Justice Department to begin denaturalization proceedings for people who fit broad and vague categories. This includes people who have a, quote, potential danger of committing terrorism or who have a, quote, nexus to terrorism. The memo from the Justice Department also outlines categories of people who should be denaturalized because they have acquired naturalization through fraudulent means. And this could apply to transgender people, which I'll explain in a minute. Finally, and most importantly, though, this memo essentially orders or allows or gives permission to Justice Department employees to essentially pursue denaturalization proceedings against anyone it deems necessary. That's because the order allows for these proceedings to take place against anyone who has pending charges that hasn't even been yet convicted of a crime. The memo, and I'm quoting here, also allows for these proceedings to take place against anyone the Justice Department determines sufficiently important to pursue. I'll read directly from a memo here. These categories are intended to guide the civil division in prioritizing which cases to pursue. However, these categories do not limit the civil division from pursuing any particular case, nor are they listed in any particular order of importance. Further, the civil division retains the discretion to pursue cases outside of these categories as it determines appropriate. The assignment of denaturalization cases may be made across sections or units based on experience, subject matter, and expertise, and the overall needs of the civil division. Now, I take that language to mean that the Trump administration and its employees and attorneys at the Justice Department can essentially start to strip citizenship away from pretty much anybody that they feel like. The vague and broad language that I just read there at the end of the memo makes this clear, but just in case, there's lots of other broad and vague language throughout the memo. First, by saying anyone who poses a, quote, potential danger to national security or who has, quote, a nexus to terrorism, the Trump administration and the Justice Department can essentially start looking at anybody that they deem to fit in those broad categories. I mean, this can include anybody who's speaking out on a college campus against our support for Israel in its war against Gaza, or who's criticizing American foreign policy in any way, or the Trump administration in any way. All we have to do is look at Guantanamo Bay to think about who could pose a, quote, potential danger to national security. There's folks who have been there for as long as I've been a reporter and a lot longer. And you don't have to take my word for it, because some of this has already happened. Marco Rubio's State Department went after Mahmoud Khalil simply because he was an outspoken protester against our involvement and support for Israel's war in Gaza. Rubio claimed that he, as Secretary of State, essentially has the ability to strip away Mahmoud Khalil's student visa, which is just one step down from what this memo says, which is essentially that any Justice Department lawyer or employee can denaturalize a citizen for stuff very similar to what Mahmoud Khalil's visa was taken for. Next up, I want to talk about some of the language in this memo about acquiring naturalization through, quote, fraudulent means. Since the beginning of the year, there's been a lot of concern amongst members of the trans community stemming from a State Department cable from February that includes the word misrepresentation when it comes to trans immigrants. Now, what the State Department cable says is that any trans immigrant who's applying for a visa or trying to enter the country can be denied either of those things if their self-identified sex doesn't match their sex at birth on something like a passport or another government document. The trans community has been concerned that this language of misrepresentation could mean laying the groundwork for essentially saying that trans immigrants and even trans Americans are essentially committing fraud by misrepresenting their gender. So I think that's some important language to pay attention to in this memo as well. because this memo says that anyone who has acquired naturalization through fraudulent means can be denaturalized for that. Does that mean trans immigrants, trans naturalized citizens? I don't know, but I know that there's a lot of concern in that community about that. Of course, hanging over all of this is the Supreme Court's decision on birthright citizenship, which they essentially allowed the Trump administration to continue to pursue the ability to say that anyone who is born here is not automatically a citizen. So if you're not automatically a citizen when you're born here, then how do you become a citizen? I would imagine there has to be some sort of naturalization process, some sort of test that you might have to take, or a set of rules or paperwork that you have to fill out with some government agency. And if this memo is to be believed, then that means essentially even those of us who are born here and who become citizens through whatever this new naturalization process is that replaces birthright citizenship, then the Justice Department has carte blanche to essentially denaturalize all of us as citizens, not just those of us who came here from another country.